talk to this guy. Without further ado, Mubs.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming out to hear my lovely English accent as well. And if you follow me on Twitter, you'll understand that. As Chris said, I work at MagGlory. We're a little software agency. We build websites and software. We're actually just across the street, just on top of the Parkside Eatery. We're about 3 years old, and we've gone from working in our houses, just taking a wild stab in the dark as to something that might work out. We're now up to 15 to 20 people, depending if you count freelancers and things like that. So in a pretty short time, I think we're doing pretty amazingly. A little bit more about me. I've been building software specifically for the internet for about 20 years. I started out doing a sports startup over in England, moved to San Francisco, moved to New York City, eventually met my wife, and we decided to start a family, and New York was way too expensive, so we ended up here. She's from upstate New York as well, so that kind of explains a little bit why we're here. But I think here is a really good place to kind of have that life-work balance that people are kind of striving for. You kind of get to work on really cool stuff, work with really talented people, but not being in a big city, you get to have the house and all the sort of amenities that comes with that. So I'm very happy to be here, and I'm happy everybody else is here too. But here we're talking about side projects. So like Chris mentioned, is like sometimes you get stuck at the job, even though you're working at an amazing company, writing amazing software for lots of people. I personally always have this little niggling thing in the background. So it would be kind of cool to just go build this piece of software that does that, because I need it, and it doesn't exist. And if it doesn't exist, why not? But so I went around and looked around. So what exactly is a side project? And I found this definition on Wikipedia, and it actually relates back to the music industry, where musicians in a band would kind of take some time away from who they worked with regularly, just to do other things, just to have fun, switch styles and things like that. And as I thought about it some more, I found that applied to what we do in the software industry as well. So I was thinking about, why do you do side projects? Well, you want to experiment with a new technology or a new technique. So for example, you want to, at your job, you're using MySQL as a database to store information, but you want to try something new. You want to use an SQL database, or you want to use Postgres instead. In a side project, you can use whatever you want. You're not tied to what your organization is using, or you're not tied to the way of doing things within your company. You can kind of do whatever you want to do. So you're free to experiment with all of the technologies and techniques that you think are interesting. You get to have some fun. So, I know a lot of designers here, they get stuck doing a specific style of website. It's all straight lines and has a specific color scheme, and you have to have the header here and the footer here, and you have to have 2 columns, and you're kind of stuck in that rut. If you're doing a side project, it could be a website for your kids' soccer team, or it could be anything, but you're free there to kind of have fun with that and have a complete different style. Use wacky colors instead of the white and the blue that you have to use everywhere else. You can use yellows and greens and pinks even if you wanted to. So I think that's an important part of a side project. Another thing that I found is that when you're in a company and you're working with a team, it can be very difficult to get exposure outside of that organization. So to kind of make people aware of what you're doing and how you're doing it, and because as part of a team, you don't want to stick your hand up and say, "Hey, I did this." But when you're doing a side project, it's yours. So you should stick your hand up and say, "I did this," because it was entirely you. Or if you're working with somebody, it's a little team that you can make people aware of what you're doing and how you're doing it, all that kind of stuff. You can also use it if you want to make a little extra cash. If you put out a website that's, let's say you make a theme for WordPress, you can put it out, you can sell it, you can make a little bit extra money too, which never hurts. So I was after I thought, I do a lot of side projects, but I thought there must be some other examples of side projects that turned into something pretty amazing. So I went looking around and I found a few examples of of things that you guys might have heard of. So Groupon, I think everybody's probably heard of, was actually a side project by Andrew Mason while he was working on a website that was kind of like Kickstarter. It was called The Point, and it was meant to be that you would raise a certain amount of money, and if you would try and raise a certain amount of money, and you reach that mark, then you would fund the project just like you do on Kickstarter. I think this was started around the same time as Kickstarter. But while he was working on that, he decided it'd be kind of cool to just go and have these kind of flash sales that worked on the same kind of concept. If you sold a certain number of these products on sale, then everybody got that product at that lower price. He put it out while he was working on The Point, and now The Point is no longer, and Groupon everybody's heard of. So that worked out. Twitter, which I use every day, and I would imagine most of you use every day as well, was actually started as a side project by Jack Dorsey while he worked at Odeo, and Odeo was a platform for people to broadcast or to manage their podcasts. And podcasting, while it's fairly popular, not quite as popular as Twitter is now. And Jack Dorsey is an amazing guy. He's actually left Twitter and he now runs Square, which you may have also heard of. So the developers in the room, and probably the project managers who will have heard of Basecamp and Ruby on Rails, which is a big part of what 37 Signals is known for. But they were also just started a side project. 37 Signals was just an agency doing websites for other people. They needed a piece of software to be able to manage that process. And they didn't find one that they were happy with, so they wrote their own. And now recently 37 Signals has changed their name, and they're now known as Basecamp. So a side project is now the project. Something for you guys who aren't necessarily into software and stuff. Cards Against Humanity is a very fun card game, and it was started by 8 friends from they were an alumni from high school. They all sat down one night and they came up with this idea to play this Cards Against Humanity game. They ended up funding the project on Kickstarter to make like the high quality versions of it, and now these guys work on Cards Against Humanity. They don't have other jobs. That's all they do now. It's another amazing story. And one final one, Uber, you may have heard of. Unfortunately, not really available around here yet. But if you go down to New York or San Francisco, anything like that, Uber is fantastic. And it was actually started by the CEO of Stumble Upon, which is actually still doing amazingly well as well. But Uber is, I believe, going to take over the world, it seems like. So those are some examples of pretty big successes of side projects. But as I mentioned, I work on one or two, and you may have heard of one or two of them. So this morning I woke up and I checked my phone, as I do, and I probably shouldn't do. I checked my email and my Google Analytics and stuff like that. And I woke up and one of my sites had 50 people on it. 50 people? Well, why are they on my website all of a sudden? But it was this website called Symbolism. And I wrote this thing in 2008 originally. And it's a very simple concept. I wanted to get an idea of what colors people associated with words, and specifically emotions at the time. So I was trying to make some new websites, and I was trying to figure out like what colors should I use to evoke. So I wanted to have a website that was trustworthy, or I wanted to have a website that was happy. So what colors should I use, and what colors should I stay away from? I didn't know. I had some ideas, but I wasn't sure. And so I built a website which basically just puts up a little question for people. They see a word, and then they select the color that they think is associated with that word. I put it out there in 2008, and it did pretty well. It got some tweet. It got featured on Mashable and Swiss Miss and a whole bunch of other blogs and things like that. last weekend I went back to it, and I was like, I should probably update this. It's been a few years since I worked on this thing. So I made it all responsive and all that kind of fun stuff that people talk about now. And I let people know that, hey, I've updated it, and this morning there was 50 people on the website. But as I've just highlighted here, in those 7-8 years that it's been live now, it's now actually 750,000 votes have occurred on the website. So I've started to build up this big database of words and their meanings, and hopefully I can do some interesting things with kind of understanding what people are actually thinking when they look at a particular color or even see a particular word as well. So that was one of my side projects. Another one, I started this with a friend of mine, Jack. I don't know if he's here. He's over there. He said he was going to come. So this is done about 3 years ago. Jack and I were talking, and we're like, wow, all these CMSs, they're so big and bloated, and you need to set up databases, and they all require these big, massive servers to run. Wouldn't it be cool if we had a CMS that was just files? And so we kicked around the idea for a little bit. Jack wrote some code, I wrote some code, I sent it to him, he sent it back to me. So we kind of did this thing in a few weeks, working in evenings and weekends and stuff like that. And we came up with this idea of using flat files. It was still going to be dynamic, but it wouldn't use a database. And we spent a few weeks, maybe months, working on it, and then we kind of pushed it out to the world, just kind of see what they would think about it. And Jack is now still working on Stautomic. He has some people helping him work with Stautomic, so we've achieved that dream of taking a side project and turning it into a real project. And it now powers hundreds, if not thousands of sites, but you may have heard of the great Content. Asana is another company that's using it to power their websites, and Mark Polton, who's a designer over from England, is also using it as well. So that was a pretty fun side project. And this is actually my latest side project. Over Christmas break, I kind of had this idea of I was listening to a podcast, and it was an interview with somebody who was working on a startup, and he was talking about the marketing that he was doing for his website, and it was an interesting conversation. And then I listened to a different podcast, and it had the same person on it, but he was talking about how he made his website responsive and why he chose to make it responsive and all sorts of things like that. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. I wonder what other podcasts this person has appeared on and what other things that they've spoken about. And I hunted and searched and couldn't find anything. And so it didn't exist. I wanted it, and so I made it. So interviewed was a fun project because it really helped me. I put a lot of effort into thinking about, okay, if I make this website, and I don't usually do this on the stuff I work at my day job, but I was like, how do I want to let the world know that this thing exists? I think people will find this interesting, and they should know about it, and I should tell them about it, but how do I do that? I didn't really know about that stuff. So I started reading, and people started telling me about growth hacking. I don't know what that means still, but I read a lot about it. And so I did use some of the techniques that I found while I was reading about it, just in terms of making a list, an email list, and kind of techniques for emailing the right people and using the right words and phrases to make them pay attention to kind of what you're saying. And so when I launched it, I actually managed to get interviewed on the day I launched it onto a new website called Product Hunt, which is actually not that new as it turned out. I thought it was pretty new. It was about a year old, but it's just right now it's kind of like the hot Silicon Valley startup. And it's funny because their job is to help you find other hot startups. So I managed to get 233, I think it votes is right now. I actually managed to get my hands on the email address of an editor over at The Next Web, and they were kind enough to write about Interviewed as well. So in that first weekend that it was live, a side project that I did, I worked on probably for about 4 weeks, was seen by about 5,000 people just in that first week that it was live. I don't know where this is going to end up yet, but it's a side project for now. But hopefully it will become something a lot more. But that, for me, is why it's important to kind of do side projects, and happy to answer any questions. Hi.
How many hours a week do you spend on side projects?
Well, it varies, but I probably spend 2 or 3 hours a day on side projects, and that's usually from about 11 o'clock onwards.
When do you go to bed most?
Well, I said last night, I was joking, I was like, I went to bed at 1 o'clock, it was like having 2 nights worth of sleep in one night. But I typically go to bed about 3 o'clock.
When do you wake up?
Depending on when the kids wake me up, so maybe like 6:30ish.
What's every night? When do you play League? Yeah. At work.
I haven't been playing as much, actually, unfortunately.
And what happens at 11 o'clock that you start?
Everybody else is asleep.
That's what
And it's funny because I actually found, even when I was in high school and college and stuff, I was most productive in those hours anyway. Maybe it's because less interruptions, or maybe it's nighttime. I put my headphones on, I listen to music, and you just start cranking out code at that point. Yes, Shay?
Well, you sort of more hackers. You used to run hack nights, right?
Yeah, we used to do Hack Assist. It was cool. It was just it was just something I wanted to do to help people if they were stuck on a project and they needed help in anything, be design or development, stuff like that. We got a little bit busy. I got a little busy with side project work, got a little bit busy, and they haven't happened. If there's an interest in having those again, I'm sure we can organize that. I can rope the Mad Glory guys into helping with those again, because we used to have them at the office. So yeah, I mean, if there's an interest, I'm sure we can organize an event again. Just tweet me if you're interested, and I guess we'll make it happen. Yeah, anything else?
Any other questions? All right, round of applause. Thank you.